For 80 years, a single currency has ruled the global economy. It didn't conquer the world through military force, but through a quiet, universal agreement. If you want to trade with anyone, anywhere, you need US dollars. That agreement was signed in 1944. 44 nations met at Bretton Woods and agreed to peg their currencies to the dollar. At the time, America held 2/3 of the world's gold, meaning the dollar was as good as physical bullion. Then, on August 15, 1971, President Richard Nixon severed that tie completely. He closed the gold window, turning the dollar into a pure fiat currency, a piece of paper backed by nothing but the full credit of the U.S. government. To keep the world buying this paper, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger flew to Riyadh in 1974 and engineered a brilliant arrangement. Saudi Arabia, and eventually all of OPEC, agreed to price all their oil exclusively in dollars. In exchange, the U.S. provided military protection.
Every country needs oil, which means every country needs dollars. To hold those dollars, foreign nations buy U.S. Treasury bonds, effectively lending money to Washington. The United States can print money and run massive budget deficits because the rest of the world is forced to absorb it. French economists called this America's exorbitant privilege. Over the last 2 decades, Washington began to use this privilege as a weapon. Instead of just deploying aircraft carriers to solve international disputes, the United States started deploying its financial infrastructure. When conflicts escalated in the 2020s, the U.S. froze hundreds of billions of dollars in Russian and Iranian sovereign assets. Washington also kicked their banks off SWIFT, the global messaging network that processes virtually all international cross-border transactions. Today, the United States currently maintains some form of economic sanction against more than 30 different countries. Watching this play out sent a shockwave through non-aligned nations across the globe. Developing countries suddenly realized that their total reliance on the dollar left their own economies completely exposed to Washington's political decisions. By weaponizing the currency to punish its adversaries, the U.S. inadvertently proved a terrifying point to its allies. Every finance minister on Earth saw that their dollar reserves were no longer safe assets. They were potential hostages. This chart shows data from the IMF's Currency Composition of Official Foreign Exchange Reserves, or COFR database. Look at the U.S. dollar's share of global foreign exchange reserves. In 2001, it sat comfortably at 73%. But over the next 2 decades, it begins a steady, documented slide. By 2025, that share drops to approximately 54%. The decline of the dollar is a mathematical reality. If the world's central banks are quietly dumping U.S. Treasury bonds and reducing their dollar exposure, the obvious question is, what are they buying instead? The answer is gold. According to the World Gold Council, central banks purchased over 2,000 tons of gold between 2023 and 2024. That is the fastest pace of gold accumulation by sovereign nations since World War I. China, Russia, and emerging markets are buying bullion month by month, effectively stopping their loans to Washington. This historic gold rush is concrete proof that the world's largest institutions are actively building an exit from American financial control.
The erosion extends into the energy markets. On June 9, 2024, the 50-year-old petrodollar agreement between the United States and Saudi Arabia quietly expired. Saudi Arabia announced it is now open to selling its oil in alternative currencies. For the first time, crude is trading in Chinese yuan. For decades, the U.S. has used the SWIFT system as an ultimate financial kill switch, forcing countries to align with American policy or face immediate economic isolation. To counter this, China built CIPS, the Cross-Border Interbank Payment System. It is a parallel financial highway designed specifically to route yuan-based transactions between thousands of global banks, completely bypassing SWIFT and Washington's oversight. Combined with blockchain initiatives like BRICS Pay, these emerging economies are doing exactly what they promised. They are constructing a fully functional, parallel global economy immune to U.S. sanctions. Despite these massive shifts, the U.S. dollar still holds tremendous structural advantages. It remains the currency used to invoice roughly 50% of all global trade, and it appears on one side of 88% of all foreign exchange transactions. The Chinese yuan also faces a severe limitation. To be a true global reserve, a currency must be freely convertible. China maintains strict domestic capital controls, meaning the government limits how money moves across its borders, which severely restricts the yuan's global adoption. Realizing the long-term danger, the United States has launched an aggressive political counterattack to keep foreign nations locked into the dollar system. President Donald Trump explicitly warned that any BRICS nation attempting to create a rival currency to bypass the dollar would face crushing 100% tariffs on their exports to the U.S. This creates a geopolitical paradox. The more aggressively the United States wields tariffs and sanctions to defend its currency, the more incentive non-aligned nations have to accelerate the construction of their alternative financial systems. History offers a clear precedent for what happens next. Before the US dollar took over, the undisputed currency of global trade was the British pound sterling. In the early 20th century, the pound held the absolute confidence of international markets. But over decades of debt accumulation and shifting global power, its share of global reserves completely collapsed, eventually falling to just 2%. This animated timeline tracks the pound's transition. It took approximately 35 years of painful, steady decline for the British pound to lose its reserve status, a trajectory that maps closely over the current downward trend of the US dollar. Public conversations often frame the end of the dollar as a sudden, catastrophic explosion that will happen tomorrow. The economic reality is a gradual, methodical transition into a multipolar financial world where no single currency has total control. The US dollar will survive for decades to come, supported by the deepest bond markets in the world. But its era of absolute dominance is ending. It will suffer a slow, quiet fade as the rest of the world steadily walks out the exits they are building today.